shows me a list of startup programs. And this is actually the same list we saw earlier, organized slightly differently. So for instance, I can choose Apple iTunes, and I can see information about that over here. And the location tells me how this program is being loaded automatically. And in this case, it's being loaded through the registry. I can also use this application to see a list of currently running programs. So even though I currently have only a very few things on my taskbar, you can see a whole host of things that are currently running on my system. And these are applications that are running in the background. Another tool I can use to see applications that are running is to go to the Task Manager. The Applications tab shows me the applications that I have launched. So for instance, if I were to open Internet Explorer, that would show on the Applications tab. A common thing to do from the Applications tab is if you have a program that cannot be closed, for instance, when you try to click on the red X, it will not close, you can open Task Manager, select the application, and click the End Task button to manually close that application. The Processes tab shows me all of the processes that are currently running on my system. Each application has at least one process, although you'll notice there are multiple processes here, even though there are currently no applications running. Again, I can end a process manually here. For instance, if I were to sort my processes by CPU time, I might find a process that is consuming much of my CPU time, but perhaps that process is not responding. And so in order to free up my CPU processing, I can manually end a process. Be careful, however, that you don't end processes that are important. So for instance, this is the Task Manager process, and I wouldn't want to actually end it from here. Another thing you can do with a process is to right-click on the process and set its priority. By default, Windows decides how to allocate resources to running processes. So for instance, in most cases, when you have a window that you're currently working in, it automatically gets a higher priority than windows that are in the background and that do not show any activity. However, in some cases, you can change the priority of a process to make sure that it still runs and receives attention from the computer, even though you may not be actively managing that application. If you have multiple processors installed in your system, you can also choose the Set Affinity option. This identifies which CPUs the process is allowed to run on. So for instance, you might want a specific process to run only on one CPU. Typically, you'll just select all and let the system balance which CPUs can be used. Finally, you can also go to the Services tab and identify the services that are currently running on your system. And again, from here, you can right-click a service to start or stop it. Or you can go to any process that might be associated with the service. Let's look at a few issues when running and managing applications. I'll type a command that I use very often in troubleshooting. Now notice that I'm told that the requested operation requires elevation. In other words, this command requires administrator privileges in order to run. I'm currently logged on as a user who does not have administrator privileges. In fact, even when you log on with a user with administrator privileges, you'll often see this same message, because user account control runs your user account as a limited user until elevation is required. In this case, elevation can only occur if I run the command prompt as an administrator. So if I need to issue this command, I'd have to close down the application, and then I can right-click the application and choose Run as Administrator. And then here I'm prompted to log on as a different user with administrator privileges, and this user account will be used only to run this one application and not to work with the entire Windows desktop. Once I log on as the administrator user for this application, I can run the command that I was prevented from running previously. I find, however, that when I'm troubleshooting, I typically open the command prompt, try to run the command that I want to run, only to receive this message. I often forget to run as administrator. So instead of every time I run the application choosing Run as Administrator, I can simply edit the properties for the shortcut and then click the Advanced button and choose the option to run administrator credentials prior to the application launching. And that will happen every time I try to run the application. Now when I try to run this command, I will be allowed because I have opened it using the administrator credentials. Another problem I might run into is that an application might not run in the current version of Windows. I'm currently running in Windows Vista. I might be trying to run an application that was intended for a previous version of Windows and run into problems as that application tries to run. Some applications will not run at all. Others might run and then show me problems as I try to perform various tasks. To modify that, I can go to the properties of the shortcut again and use the compatibility settings. Now in this case, I'm told that the compatibility modes cannot be set on a program that is a part of the Windows operating system itself. So these settings will be unavailable. In fact, I shouldn't have any problems with this program because it came with Vista. However, I might have problems with applications that I've used in previous versions. To show this, let me install an application that I've downloaded. The actual application itself doesn't matter, but we're going to use this just as an example to show the compatibility mode settings, as well as some other problems that can occur when you're managing your applications. So I'll quickly go through here and select the options to configure this application. Let me finish the installation here. And now as it actually attempts to install the application, I am prompted for permission to continue. That's because with Windows Vista, many of the actions performed during an application installation can only be performed with administrator privileges. For example, modifying the registry and other files can only be done with administrator privileges. So when you're installing applications, you need to make sure that the users have the appropriate permissions to install the applications that they need. Okay, now with the application installed, it's added an icon to the desktop. And if I right-click that, I can edit the compatibility options for this application. The first option, Run this program in compatibility mode, allows me to select the target operating system for which this application was designed. For this setting, when the application runs, it might query the operating system and ask, "What version are you?" to verify that it will run on the correct version. In some cases, if the operating system reports a higher operating system version, the application will stop. So we can, in a sense, fool the application by selecting the compatibility mode, and then when the application queries the operating system, it will report back this operating system version instead of its current version. We can also change settings such as color and screen resolutions, which might be causing problems with the application running. And finally, we can run the program as an administrator, similar to what we've seen before. I'm currently not logged on as an administrator, so to change this setting, I would need to click this button, give my administrator credentials, and then I can choose to run the program as an administrator every time it is launched. Doing that, when I run the program, you'll see that I've